Today's Dracula may have a different name in his movie, but he was legally determined to be Dracula in a controversial copyright case. Friedrich Gustav Maximilian Schreck was born in 1879 in Berlin-Friedenau. While Max Schreck's love of the theater began early in life, his father did not approve, instead wanting him to enter into more traditional trade work. Schreck took on an apprenticeship as a tradesman, but the entire time his mother supported his dreams by funding Schreck's secret acting lessons. Shortly after his father's death, Max Schreck entered the formal acting school at the Berliner Staatstheater. He toured Germany after graduation, ultimately joining Max Reinhardt's Berlin company, whose alumni would be significant players in the young German film industry at the beginning of the 20th century. Schreck himself would make his film debut in 1920's Der Richter von Zalamea, based on Pedro Calderón de la Barca's play El Alcalde de Zalamea, while simultaneously appearing on the stage in plays by Bertolt Brecht and other contemporary German playwrights. The film that made Schreck known around the world, however, was 1921's Nosferatu, the first and only movie produced by Prana Film. Many actors who found success in German film at the time would try their luck in the American film industry with varying degrees of success, but Schreck appears to have been perfectly comfortable with his life in Munich. The rest of his life was spent appearing in German film productions and acting for the Munich Kammerspiel until he passed of heart failure in 1936, shortly after having stood in for a fellow actor for an evening performance. By many accounts, the gaunt, gangly-limbed, 6'3" actor lived a private life as unusual as any character he portrayed on stage and screen. He was married to actress Fanny Norman, who appeared in Nosferatu as well in an uncredited role as the nurse. Acquaintances and co-workers of Schreck described him as a loner who liked to spend his spare time walking in the forest, and who was possessed of a surrealistic and strange sense of humor. He delighted in portraying grotesque characters, and Schreck once described himself as living in a remote and incorporeal world. During his life, it was even speculated that Schreck was not, in fact, a real person, but rather a pseudonym for actor Alfred Peter Abel, best known for playing Jo Fredersen in Fritz Lang's Metropolis. That would have been quite a feat, however, especially given that Abel was married to Elizabeth Seidel, a woman who was categorically not Fanny Norman, with whom he had a daughter named Ursula. However, the oddities of Schreck's personal life, combined with his preference for grotesque characters, and the fact that he seemed utterly uninterested in the American film industry, served over the years to build an intriguing legend that was ultimately fictionalized in E. Elias Merheig's Shadow of the Vampire, in which Max Schreck, played by Willem Dafoe, is depicted as a real-life, literal vampire discovered by Nosferatu director Murnau. Max Schreck plays the grotesque, bat-like Count Orlok in Prana Films' one and only movie, Nosferatu. Prana had been incorporated in 1921 by producer Enrico Deichmann and occultist Albin Grau, with the stated intention of producing films based around the occult and supernatural. Grau would claim in interviews that he was inspired to make Nosferatu after an experience in the winter of 1916, when Grau, then a soldier, was sheltered by a Serbian farmer who claimed to be from a family of vampires. It's almost certain that Grau's story never actually happened. But one thing that definitely did inspire Nosferatu was Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. We know this for a fact because screenwriter Henrik Galeen, who had previously written the scripts for The Student of Prague and The Golem, said that Dykman and Grau specifically asked him to adapt Dracula, but to change the setting to Germany and to change the characters' names, because they had not bothered to license the book. Yes, this movie was made while Bram Stoker's novel was still copyrighted. Rather than London, the movie opens with Count Orlok looking to purchase land in Wisborg, and also begins a grand tradition of making alterations to the story that would later be picked up by other adaptations as part of the Dracula or even the wider vampire lore. In particular, the idea that vampires find sunlight to be lethal has its origin in Nosferatu. Prior to the film's debut, all previous versions of the Dracula story and vampire lore in general had suggested that vampires find the light uncomfortable and that it takes away their general invulnerability, but it did not kill vampires until Henrik Galeen decided that it would make an excellent and highly symbolic end to the movie and simultaneously give the producers one more way in which their movie differed from Stoker's book. And yet, today the idea that vampires dissolve, melt, or even burst into flame and become crispy critters when exposed to the sun is just part of the mythology. Schreck's take on Dracula, or Count Orlok, stands apart from most of the field in that it is the least human. While Orlok converses with people and conducts business like any human being would, he makes no attempt to hide the fact that he is not like anybody else. He plays his long claw-like fingers and his towering frame against everybody, and, in a way, it's sheer politeness that allows Orlok to keep going because nobody really wants to seem put off by a fanged man with bat ears lurking in the shadows. Prana Films declared bankruptcy shortly after the film was released, even though the movie appears to have been a huge success. It established Murnau as a rising star and introduced the world to one of Schreck's favorite performances. But the success was short-lived. Florence Stoker, widow of Bram, sued the now bankrupt Prana Films for copyright infringement and won. A judge decided Count Orlok was not Count Orlok, but was in fact Dracula. Nock was Renfield. Ellen and Thomas Hutter were Mina and Jonathan Harker. And as for Abraham Van Helsing, well, he wasn't anybody because Henrik Galeen had decided the story didn't actually need a vampire hunter. But regardless, the story was obviously Stoker's. Now, it's very difficult to get money from a bankrupt company. But Florence Stoker didn't want money. She wanted the movie destroyed. And that's exactly what the German courts ordered. All copies of the movie were to be burned. However, prints of the film had already reached beyond Germany's borders into the rest of the world, and once a film print left its native land in the early 20th century, it was very difficult to keep any kind of control over it. Prints of Nosferatu were copied and recopied worldwide as the movie became a bona fide international blockbuster. With no studio actively protecting the copyright on the film, it was pirated mercilessly, and the movie wound up surviving the attempts of the Stoker estate to see it erased from the face of the earth. Today, both the film and its source novel have fallen into the public domain, and Nosferatu has been remade many times, not the least of which was Werner Herzog's 1979 remake, starring Klaus Kinski, that restored the names of the characters to those of their Dracula counterparts. Prana Film's founder and occultist Albin Grau would later be imprisoned at Buchenwald by the Nazi government for his religious beliefs. He escaped and managed to make it to Switzerland, where he spent the rest of the war. Following the fall of the Nazi Party, Grau retired to Bavaria and lived there until his passing in 1971. Gustav von Wangenheim, meanwhile, who played Thomas Hutter, was a member of the Communist Party of Germany and a founder of Die Truppe 31, a communist theater troupe that was forced to disband by the Nazi government for promoting anti-fascist political messages. Von Wangenheim fled Germany for Paris in 1933 and then made his way to Moscow, where he became a Soviet citizen and began working as a writer for Radio Free Germany. Following the war, he moved to East Germany, where he helped to rebuild the German art scene. What do you think of Max Schreck in his role as Nosferatu, a role that he apparently considered one of the greatest roles he had ever performed? Drop down into the comments and let me know. And while you're there, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And there's a share button there if you know anybody else who's really into German theater. Or if you know you have a friend who's really, really into copyright law. There's a nice copyright story in this episode, isn't there? Until next time, I am Glenn Williams, the film Optimist, and make sure that you watch like it means something.